As extraordinarily full and developed a text as Journey of the West is, we actually know remarkably little about how it was born. It comes partly from traditional legends and stretches back centuries in that. The full narrative as it exists developed through the 16th century until the version we have now was published anonymously in 1592. We still don't confidently know the author's identity. The Ming Dynasty era poet Wu Chang'en is credited, but some historians dispute that. Wu himself never claimed authorship. Prose fiction was considered relatively vulgar at the time, so he may have been ashamed to attach his name to it. But the novel has persisted. It's now regarded as a classic of Chinese literature. Translations have been introducing the work to English language readers since the 1940s. The story has branched into other media. There are a number of television adaptations out there, and it's launched some very popular video games. But also there are sequels in prose, in novels, movies, even in opera, all developing this wild story about the struggle of good and evil and the historic quest for spiritual growth and all of this stuff. Now, the story itself is based on history. A 7th century Buddhist monk named Zhuangzang traveled to India to study more authentic scriptural texts known as sutras and visit important pilgrimage sites. The trip lasted 17 years. He threaded his way through Western China, Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, and Pakistan along the way. He broke the law by leaving due to an imperial travel ban, but when he returned, he brought fresh copies of the scriptures and, with support from the emperor, established an institute to translate and teach these scriptures to a new generation. Now, this story, fleshed out with wild characters and supernatural adventurers, is about how far we have to go to find something pure. It's a hero's journey where the goal is spiritual enlightenment, but the allegory speaks to a universal human drive. But it's also about the teamwork and discipline needed for any diverse group to achieve a goal. Divided into 100 chapters, the narrative follows 4 main characters. The most iconic is probably Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, sometimes called Pilgrim. He's a flawed immortal with divine powers. The novel opens up with his birth from a stone. He develops supernatural powers and is associated with Taoism. The Buddha traps him under a mountain for 500 years and for helping lead a rebellion in heaven. But escorting the monk on this journey is his chance to redeem himself. His hubris is his defining characteristic, which helps make him quite charming. He's an emotional and volatile character and is often the most fun in the cast. Scholars trace the character from a variety of sources in legend, including the monkey god Hanuman from the Ramayana epic in ancient India, and other trickster deities who exist in traditional cultures around the world. The character based on the monk Zhuangzang is here known as Tang Sangzang, sometimes called Tripitaka, which is the Sanskrit word for the scriptures he seeks, melding that identity, his identity itself is to go and find these scriptures. Neat little narrative trick there. Tang itself, scholars link to the Tang Dynasty, from which during which he lived. He's the Buddhist figure here, a symbol of traditional devotion to principles of enlightenment, yet he's portrayed as often very foolish and helpless. He is constantly getting into trouble and needing to be rescued by his associates. 2 of his other associates would be Zhu Baiji, also known as Pigsy. He is an often comic character, given to lust, gluttony, drunkenness, and laziness. My kind of guy. He was once a military deity, but because of his behavior was banished to the mortal world, and inadvertently reincarnated as a half-man, half-pig. The symbolism is not subtle. His attachment to worldly pleasures makes his arc, I would say, his story arc, one of the challenges to achieving a kind of Taoist detachment. Sha Wujing, also known as Sandy, was also a military general in heaven, but was exiled to Earth because of his bad behavior. He's often described as a hideous monster made of sand, but is also notably diplomatic and helpful among the group. He often represents the Buddhist priority of duty and service. Interspersed throughout this narrative are about 750 individual poems. This sparks up the prose and helps confuse the easy divisions of poetic high art and low art of prose. Critics also point to the inclusion of the poetic interludes as evidence weighing in favor of Wu's authorship, since he was primarily known as a poet when he was alive. In religion, imperial China of the late Ming Dynasty saw coexistence and even, the term would be syncretism, of Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. These three teachings in this era largely influenced one another. The novel sometimes strives to harmonize the traditions and bring these disparate followers together into a unified whole of a society, which is a primary element throughout not just ancient societies, but developing societies as well. How do we knit our people together when there are so many distinctions and differences among them? Something we all struggle with to this day politically. The progress is hard to follow from time to time. There is an episodic structure to this narrative, and things happen, and then they sort of resolve, and then something else pops up, and it's always one thing after another, one adventure after another, and it's hard from time to time to discern a clear development like we modern readers expect in a novel. But there might be a method to this madness. There is a cyclical nature to the episodic structure where one thing happens and then another thing happens and then another thing happens. And this can be analogous to the cycle of life, death, and reincarnation, so central to, well, the Buddhist figures. The seeming lack of progress may suggest that progress itself is often undetectable and shouldn't really be a driving concern. The frequent bizarreness of the story can be seen the same way. Visible material concerns are diverting and entertaining and fun, but they don't necessarily matter. And yet, we keep turning the pages, amused and intrigued, entertained and thrilled, even titillated from time to time, and laughing out loud frequently. We drill down as best we can from what we can see, from what we can make sense of, trying to ferret out little meanings. Well, what could that mean? That's weird. What could that mean? And this is more than just a leisure activity or even a philosophical exercise. This is a prescription for life itself, trying to figure out what all of it means. That's why the book itself, the reading of the book itself, is itself a kind of spiritual journey for all of us.